Right. Thank you. So we are having a very interesting meeting. Thank you for being here, all of you. Thank you for the panel here. Some people are still missing. You know, ministers right now are negotiating, so it's very difficult to have them for I don't know, for 10 minutes even. So perhaps we're going to be joined by a minister from Congo. For the time being, he's co-chairing a meeting. This meeting here is a premiere. It's the first time. We're trying to have a sort of an agreement, or at least a meeting between two major players of climate change, of the problem on one side and on the solution on the other. Two major players. One is the forest. As you know, the forest is a very important asset in fighting climate change. And we have aviation, the aviation industry, which is not covered by the climate accords, but is nevertheless willing to compensate, to diminish its footprint, and perhaps to compensate. And both represent a lot. The forest, something like between 10 and 20% of emissions when you cut the forest and you cut the trees. Aviation, something between 2 and 3% of the emissions. So these two major players, I would say, agree to meet and are going to discuss. We're having an initiative which actually is coming from the forest side. The forest side, we have here with us Mr. Kevin Conrad. Kevin Conrad is working with the Coalition of the Rainforest Nations. The Coalition of the Rainforest Nations is an important actor in the climate negotiations. Mr. Kevin Conrad here introduced in 2005 in Montreal in the negotiations the idea that if you stop deforestation, you contribute a lot to combating climate change. That was called RED, Reduced Emissions from Deforestation and Degradation. So, Kevin, I understand you have a proposal to make to the aviation industry. So I suppose the best thing to do would be to give you the floor. What do you have to say to the aviation industry?
So it's clear Brice is a former politician, right? I get nervous with pictures of myself, so where's my presentation? There it is. All right. So just by way of background, I grew up deep in the jungles of Papua New Guinea. It's true, I didn't consistently wear shoes till I was 16. So forests are a very real part of who I am. 10 years ago, while I was in graduate school, I decided to write a thesis naively on how we could value forests for their ecosystem services rather than just for the land underneath them. So the key concept was, can we value forests more alive than dead? I thought that this was such a simple concept that it would take me about 2 years for the world to understand how to do it. 10 years later, I'm still here in Paris trying to negotiate the rules, but here's the reason I'm at this meeting today. If we are successful here in Paris, for the first time, we have a global agreement on how to incentivize developing countries to save their forests in a sustainable manner and supporting sustainable livelihoods. However, it's going to cost money. So we have several governments that have exhibited outstanding leadership. Norway, #1 on the list, and we have my friend Per. We have the UK. Germany has stepped up. The United States to a lesser extent. The point, however, is not enough. So how is it we can bring in other sectors? Forests are the only sector now in the UNFCCC that have a global agreement. What else can we do? We as forested countries have now met in Panama and agreed to propose to the airline industry that it's time for forests and aviation to partner and collectively reduce emissions. Aviation is about 2% of global emissions. I'm going to move very quickly. They have an ambitious plan based on their projected growth. The green area there is a combination of both implementing renewables and also bringing in issues like forests. Forests, on the other hand, is a significant source of emissions, between 10 to 20% based on how you measure degradation of forests. The REDD+ mechanism has solved many of the issues that have blocked finance going into conservation of forests. When we started, our goal was two-part. Can we reduce the risk of investing in forests, and can we lower the cost of reducing emissions from deforestation? The only way to do that is globally and at scale. We believe that engaging with the aviation we should also engage globally and at scale with the aviation industry. The REDD methodology that will be approved finally here in Paris is low cost, at scale. It has the atmospheric integrity that is required. We've completed all of the international rule set. We have clear and transparent results, and it's already supported by the World Bank, the United Nations system, reducing the risk for other actors to get involved. It's national at scale. So the reason I'm here today is, can a partnership between the forest and aviation help bridge the gap that we see re the INDCs? Right now, we're at about a 3.5-degree trajectory. Can we have a partnership that brings us closer to 2? I've outlined some steps as to how we can get that done. I don't want to bore you with that. We can talk about it offline. But the goal is simple. As the ICAO sets up its market-based mechanism, how is it that the REDD countries can create a market-based mechanism of themselves, keep the two separate, but have them engage directly? And with that, I'm going to close, and I'm going to allow the industry experts to detail that. But I don't want to steal your thunder, but Brice, you said that one is a problem and one is a solution. She says that the airline industry is a solution. I say we're both solutions. Thank you.
Great. So thank you very much, Kevin. So now you've got the idea. And second speaker comes from the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. As you know, the International Civil Organization has its own track. It's different from the climate talks. It's going to have its achievement, or its first achievement, next year. And Jane is going to explain to us the process under ICAO for the aviation. Thank you so much, Jane. Jane is Madame Environnement de l'OACI.
Thank you, Brice, for the invitation. And those of you that know Brice Lalonde, it's impossible to say no to Brice Lalonde. So I'm really honored to be here, Brice. Last time we met, in fact, was my invitation to Brice to come to Montreal to an event that we had 2 months ago that was all about how our partnerships have triggered a multiplication of action to address CO2 on aviation. And we have showcased more than 1,000 partners that we have today that are acting in the field to make it happen. And we are very proud of it. We have had a lot of initiatives. And so Brice came to our EGAP seminar, and he has then initiated or launched that idea. And I'm not sure if it was an idea or a challenge, Brice. Not yet. We are still considering if it was an idea or already a challenge. But basically, he wanted the international aviation to team up with forests. So the challenge was, how could international aviation help protect the forests? And he saw a big opportunity, and as the previous speaker, a win-win situation where we would be all both of us solutions. So what I'm doing here today, and I want to really clarify, we do not have right now a market-based measures in ICAO. We are working very hard to get there. And what I agreed to do today, and I was super clear with Brice, is to provide you with what is the process that we are going through to be able to achieve to a market-based measures next year in our assembly. We represent 191 member states. It's more or less the same constituency of the UNFCCC. And every 3 years, this 191 states come together to put the policies for international aviation forward, including policies on one of our main strategic objectives, which is environmental protection. So we will be discussing next year the policies on the upcoming years. So if I can have my first slide. Is that good? So just for you to have an idea, different than other UN organizations, ICAO does provide to its assembly, every assembly, as a first input, what we call our trends. We do that for noise, local air quality, and CO2 emissions. And the way we do that is we put the trends and we calculate how much the measures that we have taken with the different elements of a basket of measures have already reduced parts of the emissions that we have. So what you see in front is the trends from the last assembly. We'll have the review of those trends next year in terms of where we were in the last assembly when we took the decision to embark on the development of a market-based measure. So you see, we have operational measures that have, well, business as usual, basically, or without action. Then you have action with technology, action with operations, and the gray area is a mix on alternative fuels and market-based measures. Why? Because we are embarking on a series of initiatives on alternative fuels, but we still don't have certainty on how much reduction that's going to bring. So we have that part of our trends that mix both. So part of the gray area is going to be the part that if we don't achieve through technology, operations, or alternative fuels, we are going to use offsets. And currently, it is the study in ICAO is aiming on a global offsetting scheme. So I talked to you about our assembly, and you already heard, we do have, as a sector, and it's a common goal with the industry, that we'll be having carbon neutral emissions from 2020. So from 2020, CO2 emissions will stay in the same level. And because of that, and because in the short term we see it difficult to reach the stabilization of our CO2 emissions because it's a growing sector, only with technical and operational measures, we decided to embark on a global MBM development. Oops, sorry. So why, and I think you are all versed on that, it's because it can bring solutions that we could not find within the sector, but nevertheless, we will contribute with those reductions anyway. So for us, and that has to be very clear, we are a very technology-oriented sector, so it will be a gap filler. That's our intention. Our intention really is to reduce inside the sector. But while we are waiting for full technology solutions to do so, we will commit to have a market-based measures to fill that gap. To do so, it's a little bit of understanding how ICAO works. We have the assembly, 191 states. We have a council, a permanent council with 36 members that represent those states. And they have established an advisory group from that council with 17 of those council members. And we have already have 14 meetings of that advisory panel to progress the development of this MBM scheme. Supporting that, there is a Committee on Aviation Environmental Protection, CAPE. I'm the Secretary of CAPE, and I count in that committee with more than 600 of the best experts in the world on aviation and environment. And they come not only from states, but they come from states, airlines, airports, air navigation service providers, alternative fuels producers, UN, UNFCCC. So it's a big variety of actors that represent all the interested parties in these discussions, including an umbrella organization of environmental NGOs that's called ICSA, that puts together the one international representation for all NGOs. So we have 3 groups under that technical committee, one dealing with what we call monitoring, reporting, and verification for that scheme, and also with emissions units. And I think it's a discussion on emissions units that's more relevant to that panel. Of course, we also are looking into what we're going to do into the market-based measures with alternative fuels, what we are going to do with registries, but to this audience, I think is really on emissions units. So those are the elements, and it's one of the elements that will call your attention, which is the environmental integrity of emissions units. And that's where the red work in the UNFCCC is so important for us, because we will not, in ICAO, be deciding on the rules for considering emissions units from forests. That is a remit for the UNFCCC constituency. Nevertheless, we are following very closely, because that's one of the source for units that we would like to consider. But we have to have an agreement here, and we are following that very closely, that we can then consider those units in ICAO. So the way we are doing that, we are starting with the consideration of what the main principles or characteristics we want for the units that we will be using in ICAO. So it is a twofold work. One, we need to have units in a quantity that will be enough to cover our scheme, and that we have to have some certainty on that. But also we want units that are permanent, that are reliable, that have environmental integrity, et cetera, et cetera. So the units, and we are also looking into program and project level at this time. We did not take a decision where we are going to draw the line between programs and projects yet. So we are looking also on allowances. Well, we are looking into compliance markets and the voluntary markets. And of course, we are looking into emissions units, including allowances. So again, there's a lot of discussion going on. And by the next assembly, we are going to have a more certainty of the scheme. Also, we are going to look into what if we are going, how we are going to consider the early purchase of units, vintage, a sort of other elements that we'll have to consider in that discussion. And to give you a sense of our process, so I think it's very important to know we have 3 major steps next year prior to the assembly. One is the CAPE meeting in February, where we are going to decide on technical issues that will base the policy decision. Then we have GLADs. The GLADs are when we go to the countries, and it's the second time we are going to do that. When we had the decision of the Assembly to develop an NBM, they asked full consultation with our states. So it's not only the 36, but we have to go to the 191. So we developed a means to do that, where we call the GLADs, the Global Aviation Dialogues, where we get in every region, we have a session where we bring the state of development of the market-based measure in the discussions in ICAO, and we do roundtables to discuss with them in their integrity. There's in the states in that region bring civil aviation, environment, airlines, and we have a full discussion back and forth, and that feeds the process in ICAO. So after we have the GLADs next year, we are going to have a high-level meeting only for the decision of this global MBM for international aviation. And that will be the input that we'll bring to the next assembly in September next year for a final decision in ICAO. And with that, Brice, I thank you very much for the opportunity. And it was a pleasure addressing you. Let's see how much we'll be able to partner in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Aviation doesn't want to be drawn into the climate negotiation complication. But I understand you have your own complications. I don't know if we're going to follow everything in ICAO, but I mean, there we are. I'm very, very glad also that I have in front of me Michel Wackenheim. He was a French ambassador to ICAO. So thank you very much for being here, Michel. So now we're going to turn to the industry. I mean, we've got the organization explaining the process. And we have here with us Michael Gill. Michael Gill, he is the, I don't know, is your chair or the director? I don't know what you say. Of the Air Transport Action Group, actually the sustainable development body of the aviation industry, including builders, including the air companies, etc. So Michael, he came express. He said that he had to leave early, but he made the effort to come. So thank you, Michael. You have the floor.
Brice, merci beaucoup. Comme nous sommes sur le territoire français, sur ce site historique du Bourget, vous me permettrez peut-être de parler en français lors de cette séance, sortir un peu mon français pour un petit vol d'essai. Effectivement, moi je représente le Air Transport Action Group, qui est une coalition, une association qui représente tous les maillons du transport aérien, y compris les transporteurs, les aéroports, les services de navigation aérienne et la plupart des constructeurs majeurs, y compris Airbus qui est représenté aujourd'hui. Donc nous représentons vraiment tous les acteurs et nous sommes, je pense que je peux le dire, sur la même page concernant ce sujet de la réduction des émissions CO2. Notre démarche, si vous voulez, c'est d'essayer de trouver cet équilibre fondamental entre les avantages économiques et sociaux de notre industrie et une approche responsable en ce qui concerne notre impact environnemental. Donc, juste pour vous donner un peu de contexte à ces discussions, à mon point de vue sur le sujet qui nous concerne cet après-midi. Donc, tout notre travail, c'est effectivement d'essayer de trouver cet équilibre fondamental. Et c'est pourquoi, en 2008, ATAG, représentant toute l'industrie, a pris des engagements très fermes concernant la réduction des émissions CO2 venant de l'aviation internationale. C'est quelque chose qui était fait pour la première fois. C'est la première fois qu'un secteur des transports a pris de tels engagements fermes et bien définis. Les objectifs sont bien connus, je vais vous les répéter. À court terme, une amélioration de l'efficience carburant de 1,5% par an jusqu'en 2020. À compter de 2020, la stabilisation de nos émissions CO2, c'est la fameuse Carbon Neutral Growth 2020 objectif dont a déjà parlé Jane Hupe. Et puis, dans le long terme, à partir de 2050, nous espérons avoir divisé en deux nos émissions CO2 par rapport au niveau de 2005. Et donc, pour arriver à ces objectifs, l'industrie aérienne a mis en place un plan bien clair qui est basé sur 4 piliers d'action. Et je pense que c'est intéressant quand même de le répéter parce que ça se situe dans le contexte de la discussion d'aujourd'hui. L'investissement dans des nouvelles technologies, y compris des biocarburants, les opérations des techniques opératoires beaucoup plus efficaces pour réduire les émissions de CO2 dans chaque vol, l'usage des infrastructures plus efficient et ce dont on parle aujourd'hui, effectivement, les mesures économiques, le Global Market Based Measure, ou MBM, qui est sous discussion au niveau de l'OACI. Il faut le noter aussi, c'est quand même assez inhabituel qu'une industrie vienne voir les États, vienne voir l'OACI en demandant une régulation, en demandant qu'on mette en place un système de mesures économiques, mais c'est parce qu'on est vraiment sur la même longueur d'onde que l'OACI, que les États membres de l'OACI dans le développement de ces mesures. Donc c'est vraiment, je pense, une situation assez inhabituelle, assez unique. Mais il faut quand même noter que les travaux sur le MBM ne sont qu'une partie de notre approche. Nous insistons vraiment sur les 4 piliers de notre stratégie, et les discussions qui ont lieu au niveau de l'OACI sont une partie cruciale, mais ne sont qu'un des piliers d'action de notre stratégie. Qu'est-ce que j'en pense, des négociations à l'OACI? Jane Hupe l'a très bien résumé. Je ne souhaiterais rien rajouter sur le fond. De mon point de vue, ces travaux avancent très bien. Nous sommes très satisfaits de l'engagement de tous les gouvernements dans ces discussions. L'industrie est représentée, a été invitée à participer à tous les travaux, tant au niveau politique qu'au niveau technique. Et nous trouvons que, à la date d'aujourd'hui, décembre 2015, avec l'Assemblée prévue pour septembre 2016, nous sommes vraiment en état pour pouvoir avoir une négociation réussite, et nous sommes très satisfaits du progrès de ces travaux. Il y a beaucoup de choses à faire, il y a beaucoup de discussions qui vont avoir lieu dans les mois à venir. Les questions politiques, bon, vous les connaissez très bien parce que c'est à peu près les mêmes questions qui sont soulevées à quelques centaines de mètres d'ici, mais dans un autre contexte. Sur l'aspect technique, Jane, encore une fois, l'a très bien résumé. Il y a deux grandes questions. D'une partie, c'est le système de suivi, de déclaration, de vérification des émissions de chaque transporteur qui participera dans le futur MBM. Et d'autre part, c'est la définition des critères d'éligibilité des unités de compensation dans le nouveau système. Et moi, je ne peux que souligner ce qui a été dit par Jane Hupe. Les transporteurs aériens souhaitent avoir la garantie d'un accès au choix des unités le plus large possible dans un futur MBM, dans un futur système de compensation. Et je pense que avec une bonne définition de ces critères, avec la participation des différents acteurs dans ce travail de définition, les projets RED ou RED+, pourraient très bien être acceptés dans le contexte de ce système global. Et je dirais même que pour des transporteurs, ce type de projet a beaucoup d'aspects qui sont assez attirants quand même par rapport à d'autres choix. Mais encore une fois, il faut que ce soit situé dans le contexte d'avoir l'accès à un choix de projet le plus large possible. Voilà, Brice, ce que je voulais vous en dire. Bien sûr, je suis prêt à répondre aux questions. Maintenant, si je m'échappe à une certaine heure, vous me le pardonnerez. Ce n'est pas par manque de politesse, mais uniquement que j'ai un autre engagement à côté. Merci beaucoup.
Ça m'embête de me remettre à l'anglais, mais bon. C'est la règle un peu des négociations. So, thank you, Michael, very much. So now we sort of see a little better what is at stake. You know, the aviation is working on all the paths to reduce its emissions, technological or the operations. You know, for instance, the European One Sky or things like that. But in the end, they will need to have some offsets or some compensation. And they say, okay, why not? But of course, we want very good units. They have to be guaranteed, etc. Okay. So that will be for the forest to do its job. We also need to have support, because in the end, the decision will not only be from the industry or from the. It will also be political, because the ICAO is also ambassador-driven. You know that, it's ambassador-driven, and the UNFCCC is also. Ambassador-driven, I mean country-driven, negotiators-driven. And this is why we have the luck to have with us Per Pharo. Per, he is from Norway. And Norway has always been a very strong supporter of the forest. And this is why it's important, if we have this idea of the forest asking aviation, hey, we have a market-based measure to suggest it to you, it's important to have the support of countries like Norway. So, Per, please, explain all what Norway has done for the forest.
So, thank you. So, the policy of the government of Norway is that all sectors and geographies should have carbon pricing or regulations. And of course, in that light, it's really encouraging to see all involved in the aviation industry working diligently towards this market-based mechanism to address the industry's emissions. Our main hope is that such a system will be as robust as possible and have the greatest possible climate effects. And certainly there are other sectors that might be relevant for this, but I'll stick to forests since that is the theme. I think for this to work, we need to focus on a few issues. Environmental integrity being absolutely crucial, safeguards against negative side effects being absolutely crucial, additionality of efforts is part of the environmental integrity issue. There are also, as we heard, issues about price and quantity, secure supply, so to speak. It is our firm conviction that tropical forests can provide all of this. As Kevin touched upon, we have a fully developed framework under the UN Climate Change Convention. The outfit that I run, the Norwegian Climate and Forest Initiative, has been part of developing that, and we've also in parallel worked on practical examples on the ground with countries of how this could be done. We have clarity on monitoring, reporting, and verification. I think it's safe to say that that is no longer an issue, whether we can monitor, report, and verify emission reductions from forests. Using mainly satellite technology, but also on-the-ground checks, and applying principles of conservativeness to ensure the integrity of the measurements and the reductions. The reference level issue, we have clear guidance. That, of course, is what determines whether there is real additionality. We have negotiated safeguards on the social side, especially the rights of local peoples and indigenous communities and so on. On the environmental side, to ensure against negative side effects, for example, for biodiversity, and on the fiduciary side, and also issues of benefit sharing. The current running price of a ton of forest carbon is $5 US. I'm sure Kevin would like to negotiate that up, and I'm quite sure that will happen too. But the point is to illustrate that these are affordable tons. That's the framework. And then there is the fact that this has actually happened. Brazil being the poster child, of course, going from being in quantity a high deforester. Actually, in percentage of forest cover, the deforestation wasn't that high. It was about average. Now it has fallen by about 75% in the Brazilian Amazon over the last decades. Places like Acre, Mato Grosso, Brazil, seen massive reductions, Pará as well, over the last decade. Mato Grosso being the most extreme case, seeing an almost 90% reduction in its deforestation over the last decade. We are working with a number of other countries as well, Peru, Colombia, Liberia, Ethiopia, and so on. There is also an international multilateral collaboration on this under the World Bank called the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility Carbon Fund, which now has a portfolio of 10 large-scale jurisdictional pilots under negotiations, which will see countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Guatemala, Costa Rica participate. My point being that this is happening, and these tons are in the process of being delivered. I would advise you having a look at the home site of the FCPF Carbon Fund or on our homepage to get more details on this. for a very interesting exposition of how thorough this work is, I would advise you to look at, for example, our memorandum of understanding with Colombia or Peru. There are a number of things that needs to happen to get to verified emission reductions in forest countries. But the point is we have a dozen at least working very seriously and many more being at an early stage. I think the key point is there is obviously work to do in setting out the rule set. This is what will happen over the next years. There will be with any kind of offset. But I think the debate as to whether it's doable to produce rock-solid environmental integrity emissions reductions verified from forests in developing countries, that debate is basically over. The scale is exceptional. Potentially, according to the IPCC, this could be up to 1/3 of the mitigation we need over the next 2 decades to stay on a 2-degree pathway. I think I would also add that from a broader perspective of sustainable development, forest conservation is a major issue. Simply put, there is no sustainable development without maintaining our tropical forests. And incentives like this ICAO mechanism could be a key driver to make that happen, adding a lot of benefits beyond the carbon, which is good enough reason in itself. Conservation and restoration of forests, when done right, can strengthen local communities, empower indigenous peoples, improve natural resource governance, and contribute to improved livelihoods. And REDD+, as it's called under the convention, can and will contribute to broader sustainable development. We can have a transformative effect on that count as well. So I think Kevin made the point that we have pretty much everything ready. What we lack is sustainable, adequate, predictable, rules-based finance. That is crucial because altering your development path from high deforestation to low deforestation is a very serious choice for a country to take. There are trade-offs. There are political costs, there are financial costs, especially in the short and medium terms. And the ICAO market-based mechanism could be a key factor in incentivizing that change and thereby making it much more likely that we will achieve the 2-degree target and a better sustainable development future. Thank you.
Thank you, Per. This is very, very encouraging. So we should have with us Minister Henry Jombo from Congo-Brazzaville, but he's co-chairing a meeting on forest in the Blue Zone. And we should also have with us Lionel Guérin, who is the CEO of Hupe, which is a subsidiary of Air France, but she's with Ségolène Royal. Ségolène Royal, she's the Minister for Transport and Environment in France, and I don't know, there's something happening with her in the Blue Zone. So until they're coming, we should go on with our discussion. So we know what is at stake. Okay, aviation is working on its market-based measures. It's saying, of course, everything has to be perfect. Yes, of course. But also that each air company should have the choice between different avenues, different offsets. But on the other hand, what's very interesting in my view with this proposal is that the reduction units which will be proposed by the forest are streamlined. It's all streamlined, all organized, all done. So the company does not have the burden to look for the project, to validate it, to see the experts, etc. So that's the big, I would say, interest for the aviation or for the industry. It's all done for them by the forest countries. Now, nevertheless, there is some work ahead, Kevin. So what are the next steps? I mean, at one point, countries from your coalition of the rainforest country must engage with ICAO and start having a working group or, discussing, I suppose.
Thanks, Brice. 2 quick points when we start thinking about the way forward. The first point is that the voluntary and project approach to REDD is dead. okay? What the UNFCCC has done has created a system that ups the environmental integrity and can incorporate under the UNFCCC process all of these individual actions. So anytime you invest directly in a particular project without it being part of the national monitoring and accounting system, you're basically buying hot air, no matter what they tell you. But those have been very important and useful learning exercises, and they shouldn't be devalued for that standpoint. So now the question is to bring those into the formal UNFCCC system so that we can maximize the environmental and social integrity. So that's one part of what's next. The other part of what's next is that we must formally engage and help the airline industry in what I call this best case scenario and practical reality. So the airline industry says we want as many options as possible, but yet they're talking about offsets. An offset is a very, very dangerous mechanism unless you have supreme environmental integrity. Because if you do not, basically you have double emissions. So when we start talking about offsets, we have to pursue the highest quality emission reduction possible. And we have to pursue those that are certified by the UNFCCC, which is the global body to certify these emission reductions. That's where we have to go. And so the point is keeping the two processes separate, but finding a way to link them together. And that's where the countries that are at the UNFCCC have to engage in the ICAO process. They have to work with the formal ICAO, which is also a UN organization, to ensure that we harmonize our standards. How is it that we can help achieve the highest quality emission reduction so that the airline industry proposes a real win-win-win? A win for the airline industry, a win for developing countries, and a win for the environment. If we can't achieve those three things, there's no point in even beginning.
Great. Okay, so now we know where we all stand. I was told that Lionel Guérin is on his way. So, I mean, you know how it is. So for those who came from the Blue Zone or the other one, it takes quite a long time to understand how to get here. So I suppose we'll have to wait for that. Perhaps it's time to open up. I mean, to you, I can see that in the room we have some representatives of the aviation industry, probably some defenders of the forest. Perhaps it's time to see if we can build this alliance. Any questions from the audience? Yes. Here.
Jean-Marc Jancovici from the Ship Project. I'm afraid I'm going to ask a stupid question, but nevertheless, I'm old enough now to dare. Before this conference, I understood that the mechanism was actually a straightforward mechanism with some kind of a carbon tax levied on the, no, I know, I understood, it's not that. Levied on the plane tickets, going to a place, redistributed to projects, and as you have a sum of money that you know in advance, you know to which extent you can finance what. Now I understand that you have a market mechanism, and we have witnessed in Europe what a market mechanism can yield and what it cannot yield, and the only thing it cannot yield is a predictable price. And if you do not have a predictable price, you don't know whether a given project is going to be viable or not. So how do you expect to overturn this difficulty?
This question goes to everybody, I would say, because it's not only the forest, it's also ICAO and the industry. I mean, you know, some people think of a floor and the ceiling, but perhaps I should let Jane start. Okay, Jane.
Well, the first thing I have to say right now, we don't know, because we are still working on it. So again, bear with me. We are still developing something, and I'm very happy you brought that issue to the attention of the others in the room. There has been many proposals that we have considered in ICAO for a market measure. Right now, the basis for the development of our global MBM is a global offsetting, and that's what we are working more in developing right now. the difficulties that we would have with a simple tax that we found was the lack of environmental integrity. Because we have a goal, we have a carbon neutral goal. We have to measure what the amount of emissions that we have to achieve to keep carbon neutrality. So for us, it has to be a scheme that would allow us for that integrity and to account for all those emissions in a very clear and transparent manner. And also, together with the market-based measures, what we have is also what we call the state action plans, where each state voluntarily select the measures that they are going to be taking to reduce aviation emissions. And the important point being that they will continue to trigger the other elements in the basket of measures to minimize the use for a market mechanism, because the ultimate objective that we have is to reduce within aviation. So you have probably heard 2 weeks ago, we have the first aviation, it's domestic aviation, but the first aviation project that went through the CDM board. At the same time that we are considering what are the emissions units that we can have for an aviation scheme, we have many states in ICAO that say, well, but couldn't be a market incentive, and projects that would reduce also in aviation, could be in domestic aviation, but at least it would be aviation. So that's also a consideration we are having. In terms of the price, which was a specific question, we are considering some sort of sunset clause. If things really get completely out of control, many of our states are very reluctant still on a market measure, and they need some safeguards. How that safeguard is going to play or not, we don't know, because we're still developing. So, but there were discussions on a possible sunset clause or safeguard. That's something we will be looking into that. Being an MBM, it's very difficult to put a cap on price, because the definition of an MBM should be a cost-effective measure, so complicated to connect the two. But some sort of safeguard, some sort of proportion, some sort of sunset clause in the scheme, I think at the end there will be something there in this regard.
Okay. Yes, Michael.
Please, just to add to that, obviously our hope is from 2020 there will be a mandatory offsetting scheme in place under the auspices of ICAO. But just to bear in mind also, in the period between now and then, a number of airlines, at least 30 of IATA's member airlines, and then countless other airlines around the world already have in place offsetting programs on a voluntary basis. And these programs have proved extremely successful. They've proved extremely successful in reducing environmental impact. They help to finance important projects, including the type of project that we're talking about here. And many of them are attractive to carriers because of the social context, as well as the environmental benefits that they bring. So I think that's also important to bear in mind. It also gives us some reassurance that under a future mandatory scheme that it would work, because many airlines are already doing this on a voluntary basis.
I'd sort of like to add the forest country perspective. And from our perspective, in order to succeed, we're going to need a blended finance structure. And that's where the role of Norway, and they've made these commitments that they're going to continue into the future, that this is a long-term investment for them. And to a certain extent, that can provide, in effect, a floor that can get a lot of activities going. The other observation about markets and pricing, you've got to keep in mind that where the direction RED is going now is not about projects anymore, not about isolated, physically constrained projects. These are national level implementation tools. So governments are going to go after low cost or low opportunity cost options first. And over time, they're going to start ramping it up into higher opportunity cost. So the goal of carbon markets, I think, globally, is going to be to start low and over time rise. And as they rise, they're going to pull more and more higher cost opportunity activities into the mix. So you're right, there is some volatility, and mismanaged markets tend to be far more volatile than others. So we all need to collectively think about managing the volatility of our markets, focused on the fact that the price should rise over time, and using a blended source of finance to put together the packages together. But you're right, this is complex. One tool is not going to solve the problem.
Okay, Cedric Ringenbach, I'm the director of the Shift project. One question about the fact that for a market, we want a market-based mechanism. For a market, you're going to talk about CO2 and money. And there is one criteria, which is CO2. And red projects are more complicated than that. It's not only a stock of carbon in a tree. It's also biodiversity preservation. It's water resources. It's economical. It's development. And how do you take into account all these components of a project on a market where usually you have one dimension to manage? How do you do that? Maybe it's still on the table. It's a lot of work to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting question, and I think it is possible to overcomplicate this as well. I think just building on what Kevin said, this is about sort of national development choice, and there are a number of things you need to do. Some of them have very little financial cost, but potentially quite a high political cost. Some of it is enforcement. It has a cost, but it's relatively small. And then there are the other benefits, which accrues to the country rather than to the globe. So the total picture probably is that there are a number of reasons for a country to reduce deforestation, and there are some costs. And what you're doing with this scheme is you introduce one cash flow that will tilt the sum of incentives in the right direction. So I think it's probably useful to stick to the tons of carbon as what you pay for, but you do that in the full knowledge that you're operating within, so to speak, an ecosystem of costs and benefits that determine whether a country will go for this or not. But this is something where there is hopefully a willingness to pay that you can add to. There are a number of public goods, global and local, that are currently unpriced, involved in keeping the forest. Carbon is the one where you might actually get someone to pay. That could help tilt the movement in the right direction, while for doing something that would add a whole number of other benefits too.
Okay, thank you. So this is, yes, please, do you have a microphone?
Hi, my name is Arild Pharo. I'm a journalist in the Norwegian newspaper Aftenposten. And my question is to Jane Hupe. Why wouldn't it be smart to have a carbon tax with a specific price on each 100 kilometers, for instance?
I think I have already responded to that question. The way we see it is a temporary measure, and we want one market-based measures that gives us environmental integrity. A tax doesn't give you environmental integrity. A tax usually goes to the coffers of the governments, and you have no way of knowing where this money is going to go. And in the name of environment, we have seen a lot of taxes going on, even in aviation. And when we digged a little bit more, was everything but environment. In a discussion that's already very politically charged on environment, and where you have developed countries, etc., some of the developing countries in ICAO bring the view that they're still growing as airlines, where in other parts of the world they are already mature. They say, why are we now then paying the bill of the environment without seeing a real environmental response for aviation? That's one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is we have a lot of islands that depend fully on aviation. And if we have criteria for our market-based measure that we will really try to trigger projects that are in developing countries. And for example, forests, you have a huge quantity of forests that are rainforest countries that are developing countries. And there are other ways, other criteria that we could follow that would benefit more investment in developing countries. The seeds countries come to us, and what they say is, any tax on aviation is to take the money from the left pocket and put the money in the right pocket. But do that with a diminishing and an impact in our tourism. And they are against it. So we have to think what we want to do and what are the real impacts that are going to be caused. So a tax on aviation is the easiest thing someone can do. Why? Because it's fully organized. Everybody talks about the $1 tax on aviation for seed, for woman protection, for child protection, for blah, blah, blah. Seriously, if you have ever really looked to your cheek, and on top, we have to hear that aviation is not taxed. But if you have ever looked into your ticket, you have some parts of the world right now where the price of the ticket that you are paying is 20% of what you're seeing in your bill, and 80% is tax that you have no idea where it is going. So in terms of developing, for some of the developing world that are completely reliable in air transport because they have no other means, continuing to just go on taxes and taxes and not look in the overarching picture is what they are not wanting us to do.
Just to pick up before you go on, we have the same problem with boats because it's another bunker fuel call in the negotiation process, and it's the other organization, the International Maritime Organization, IMO. They're also working. It's also an issue for islands, of course, because islands depend on boats also and on aeroplanes. And it's also a question related to the global commons. Going to the sea, are you allowed to go to the sea without paying anything? Because it's open to everybody. Is it still Mr. Grotius, you know, the famous lawyer in the Renaissance times who said it's open to everyone? But if it's open to everyone, it's also open to everyone to plunder it. And so now there's a big discussion. Well, how do you do on these global commons? So aviation actually is ahead of the boats for the time being, and this is very interesting. And I must say here that I commend the aviation industry being very modern, very far-sighted, because, you know, when you build a plane, it's there for 30 years. I'm saying that in front of Airbus. And so, you know, I think the efforts of the aviation are worthwhile to commend because they're going faster than the boat industry, which, by the way, is using the most dirtiest bunker fuel you could ever imagine. Go on, sorry.
Question. Could it be an alternative to have not a tax, which goes to the government covers, but a fee that goes directly to rainforest projects, which the airlines collect?
It's exactly the same. The minute you take the minute you do a measure where you have the state being sovereign to use the funds, and sorry to say that, once the fund is collected by a state as a tax, and you have probably heard that many times from many parties and many states, they are sovereign to use the tax the way they please. There is no way you can guarantee that use. And there will be defeating the purpose that we have for the market-based measures, which is really to reach carbon neutrality for international aviation. And again, it is hard enough in a process for us to have an agreement of 191 states, which are the same states that are here. Some of those discussions are also replicated in our forum to have an agreement on a simple offset. Every time that you try to make it more complicated, put more elements, put more options, etc., you're only complicating the solution. And we have now looked into emissions trading with a fee, a tax. I cannot even remember how many options we have looked at. And at the end of all the studies, what seems to be more straightforward with more environmental integrity and more practical to implement has come to global offsetting. That's the current state of discussions. Again, that's not a final decision in ICAO, and that we'll only have in the next assembly, and I'll be pleased to, after the assembly, come here and say what was the decision of our assembly. Thank you.
From a forest perspective, we're much more apolitical on this, that economically, the key is about carbon pricing. So if a tax measure is supportive of, it creates a carbon price, that's one tool. But also you need some flexibility. And so for us, we would say it's up to countries, it's up to airlines to pick sort of the most relevant tool in their legal system. There are some governments that are not transparent. There are other governments that are transparent. There are some that are willing to set up funds. So there's a whole variety of approaches, and we would be a little more flexible as to which tool would work in the context of a national circumstance. I see some people dozing off, and I have a rapper who's going to summarize this meeting in a little bit. So stay tuned for that.
Hello? Yeah. Hello, my name is Sylvain Goupy. I'm running a Red Plus Fund, private public fund. Going back to the question about projects or jurisdiction or country, yeah, I understand from Jane that it's still an open discussion. I understand from you, Kevin, that your view is that project level is dead and it's all about jurisdictional or national level, or maybe I'm wrong. But when we talk about market-based mechanism, we're talking about buyers and sellers. So I understand the buyers will be the aviation companies or companies, corporates, when the sellers would be either projects or nations. You know, and I don't know any market which is working where basically the buyers are private companies and the sellers are, you know, countries. So how do you, have you thought about who will be the players on this market mechanism?
Have you studied the oil industry? What's Saudi Arabia? What's Norway? Those are generally governments, and they're exchanging in global commodity markets. But back to your point, what we're advocating is that there is environmental integrity, and in order for environmental integrity, you have to have a national monitoring system. And I don't want to get into details, but it's very easy in developing countries to take money in one area, use that money to deforest in another area, and get into the cow business. So the only way you can pick that up is to have a national monitoring system. What we're encouraging developing countries to do is to devolve the credits. So if a nation goes to the UNFCCC, earns 1 million credits that are certified, it must engage with those who are reducing emissions directly, including those who are running a project. If it does not, then the project operator runs away. The emissions in deforestation will continue. So there has to be a direct dialogue in a national context between the emission reductions and the certification at a national level and the implementation. So what you're talking about is an implementational issue. But first, before you can implement effectively and certify to a buyer that they have a real emission reduction, you have to have a national certification process. And that's what the UNFCCC does. The UNFCCC is not mandating to any country how they engage with the project organizers in their country. That's going to separate one country from another in terms of their success. This is my view. The more you can engage with the on-the-ground actors, and the more you can transparently transfer your emission reduction so that they can trade it as they see fit, the more successful the country is going to be in reducing emissions. Some countries won't operate that way, but those that do are going to be the fastest to move and will gain the money the quickest and the earliest.
Yeah, just building on that, I mean, there are good reasons why it's done this way and why this is left to country discretion. It's going to differ enormously from country to country. If you have a country like Guyana with almost no historical deforestation, few of the drivers are present, you're mainly talking about a government-run setting and some payment for ecosystem services on the frontier. In other countries, you have massive drivers spread around the country in a mosaic. That's a very different situation. So that's number one. Number two is a lot of what needs to be done will actually be public policy and enforcement. And the risk, if you leave this to projects, is that you actually have the public sector picking up a huge bill for keeping reductions down generally, but you basically allow private project developers to pick off the resource rent, so to speak, of something that is really a collective national effort. So there are very good reasons why the UNFCCC system is designed the way it is. And I would add that if this system is going to have any credibility using RED+, it needs to stick to those rules. Because if not, the additionality and the environmental integrity and also a lot of the safeguards issues simply will not be resolved. And I apologize, I have to leave. So I'm going to miss Kevin's rap. I hope someone YouTubes it.
Well, okay, Per, thank you very much. I mean, Norway has done such a big job on forest. Thank you. But so before the wrap, we have the chance of having Mr. Lionel Guérin. Lionel Guérin, he's the CEO of Hupe, as I said, a subsidiary of Air France. And he's kind enough to have made all the way to come here while he was in the hands of Ségolène Royal. So thank you very much for being able to make it. So great. So this is an award you won, actually.
Oui.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Je vais parler en français, si ça ne vous dérange pas. C'est un prix qui vient d'être remis pour la stratégie nationale pour la biodiversité, mais qui n'est pas lié qu'à Hupe, qui est lié à l'aviation civile française, puisqu'elle est dans l'association. Elle est avec moi, et les aéroports français.
Bravo.
Dans lequel on développe des plateformes aéroportuaires avec le muséum, qui est aussi dans l'association, un comité scientifique. Et voilà, on avait un peu de retard, j'en suis désolé. Je voulais dire 3 ou 4 mots par rapport à cette belle initiative. D'abord, je parlerai un peu au nom du groupe Air France, mais aussi en mon nom propre. Le groupe Air France, depuis 5 ans, depuis plus de 5 ans, la 6e année bientôt, compense du carbone à Madagascar sur un programme de, je suis la directrice devant moi, du développement durable qui me regarde, 500 000 hectares, hein, c'est ça, 500 000 hectares à Madagascar, pas seul, avec l'association, l'Agence française pour le développement, avec le WWF de Madagascar, avec l'agence ATTAC, pour compenser sur des programmes tels le RED+. En 3 mots, je pense que l'aérien, effectivement, produit 3%, 3-4% de gaz à effet de serre, 8% du pétrole global. Mais au-delà de ça, il faut s'attaquer d'abord à l'origine des émissions. L'origine des émissions, c'est nos avions. Alors, il faut des avions récents, il faut des nouvelles technologies. Je crois que ce qui est important, c'est de dire qu'il faut d'abord diminuer nos émissions avant de compenser. Et pour comme 90% d'une airline, c'est l'avion. Sur ces 80% c'est le long courrier. Donc il faut trouver des avions, notamment long courrier, qui consomment moins. Et je pense que, heureusement, que des nouvelles technologies arrivent maintenant, sont en train d'arriver, les nouveaux Boeing et les nouveaux Airbus. Mais ça n'engage que moi, pas Air France, je trouve qu'on a mis beaucoup de temps. Les Airbus 320 volent depuis 30 ans, les 737 volent depuis 30 ans. Il a fallu, je crois, que la Chine demande des nouveaux moteurs pour trouver des consommations réduites. Donc ça veut dire qu'il faut faire une pression d'abord, comme pour la voiture, à la source. La source, c'est les avions, comme sur la route, c'est les voitures. La voiture, c'est des vignettes ou des taxes à l'origine. Je pense que les avions, on aurait pu imaginer quelque chose comme ça. À la source. Et pas dans le transport, mais sur ces 2 constructeurs. Et puis utiliser bien ces subventions qui sont données chez les constructeurs pour inventer de nouvelles technologies. Ce n'est pas lié qu'à l'environnement, c'est lié à l'économie de nos airlines, dont 30% de nos coûts sont des dépenses de carburant. Une fois que j'ai dit ça sur la compensation, je pense que la compensation, l'idée que vous développez, Brice, est une belle idée. Je partage. Je préfère aller directement, personnellement, à la compensation plutôt que de passer par des bourses d'échange qui, de toute façon, sont toujours récupérées un jour ou l'autre. C'est comme les transactions pétrolières. 10% sont physiques et 90% ne sont pas physiques. Donc ça veut dire qu'il faut éviter ça sur les échanges carbone. Aller directement. Après, ça pose plein de problèmes. Je n'étais pas là, mais j'ai entendu avant à distance ce qui se disait sur les programmes RED+, notamment, sur le fait qu'il y ait une traçabilité complète et une grande cohérence sur le sujet. Et je trouve que c'est une belle idée de dire qu'à chaque fois que l'on vole, eh bien on empêche une forêt de se déforester ou on aide localement à une recomposition de la forêt. Mais je voudrais aller plus loin que sur la neutralité. Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, le temps compte. On a perdu beaucoup de temps à se poser des questions. Et il faut y aller. Je veux dire, bon, même si c'est sûr qu'à 90%, il ne faut pas attendre. Je pense qu'on n'a plus le temps d'attendre dans ces programmes-là. Et ensuite, il faut aussi être beaucoup plus positif. Quand j'entends la neutralité, pour moi, je trouve que c'est un peu... C'est pas assez ambitieux, quoi. Il ne faut pas être neutre, il faut être positif. C'est Positive Impact de Nicolas Hulot. Hein. Il faut oser, il faut y aller, il faut être beaucoup plus positif. Et puis ne pas hésiter à dire que si on prend du retard, mais il faut aller encore plus comme un business plan. C'est-à-dire que si on prend 5 ans de retard, eh ben, on compensera 2 fois plus, et 3 fois plus, et 4 fois plus, de manière à vraiment inverser la tendance. Il ne suffit pas de dire on est neutre parce qu'on a jusqu'à maintenant, on n'a pas pu le faire, puis bon, bah, on compense, il faut aller beaucoup plus loin. Voilà ce que je voulais dire aujourd'hui. Merci.
Très bien.
So I'd like to give you another award. Very, very good statement.
Bon, voilà. Alors, vous avez à côté de vous M. Kevin Conrad, qui représente la coalition des nations forestières ombrophiles, qui est dans la proposition, et Mme Jane Hupe, qui est Madame Environnement à l'OACI. Voilà. Bon, eh bien, M. Wackenheim, qu'est-ce qu'on... Pardon? Est-ce qu'on peut avoir un micro?
Hi.
Bon, une question d'abord et ensuite...
Hi, I'm Xavier Chondo from EcoCert. We are certifying carbon projects on the voluntary market. I had two questions on the same topic, the fungibility of carbon credits between RED plus mechanism on VCS, voluntary markets, the mandatory market. And the other question is if you have a plan between IMO and ICAO for fungibility between the transport sector, maritime and aviation. Thank you.
Make it even more complicated. Okay, who wants to answer on that one?
Fun question.
So, on your first question, again, I will have to repeat myself. We have not taken any decision between mandatory and voluntary. We are looking at that. We have started the discussions and the studies and the research 6 years ago, specifically on the carbon market, and we have followed. We are not a climate organization or a market organization, but what we were looking in terms of price is that we had more stability on the voluntary market for some reason, and we were very curious to see why. So that's why we were studying, looking into the voluntary market, even the project of Forest, and we were asking all those questions. So right now, we have had big steps in the UNFCCC, and I think everything is evolving. The RED Plus program is different right now, and there were important decisions taken in terms of permanence, in terms of a series of other criteria that it's very important for that discussion. So my answer to you, right now, we are looking to all the markets. We will consider for the global MDM emissions units that have the characteristics that we are going to agree in ICAO. Be robust, be permanent, be integer, and of course, why you put those criteria once a state or the operator of that state will access those emissions is a market. They are going to look into the price as well. So those will be the criteria for us. And it's not for us to resolve any issues of fungibility of the emissions market, or we are buyers. So we are going to say, okay, I want a TV. My TV is 30 centimeters by 50 centimeters. I want a color TV. I want a very good, we are going to define the product that we want. In terms, as our colleague from Norway say, in terms of CO2, but also if there is other additional features that we can also look into the social, etc., that will complement. Of course, if you're going to say, I want to buy a TV, and you get the liquid, the blender with, well, fine, we love the TV plus the blender, well, but it's not for us in ICAO to take those decisions on the market. It's just we are going to take the criteria for aviation that is important for us to have a very serious gap filler for our main objective, which is to reduce emissions from aviation.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. Can I comment on that? Please, yes, Kevin.
Sorry, so two quick comments. One, I think you answered your own question. The whole purpose of a voluntary market is to engage before there is an official market. At the conclusion of Paris, the rule set is going to be officially approved. So you're going to have the challenge of double counting. So a country now has to report. If you've already been paid and run away with the money, then it has to be subtracted out of the country's inventories, right? So then you're going to have this tension where you're going to have to resolve those issues. So over time, the voluntary market in red is going to transition into the official market, but it has been a very, very important beginning. And so we have to treat that with respect and bring it in successfully. But it's an early mover. The second question is, from a forest perspective, we laud the leadership of the aviation industry, and we want to work with them. IMO is next, but also steel, also cement. There are many other industries that need to be partnering with forests, and we want to start with the aviation industry because they're most advanced. But believe me, if we haven't thrown down the gauntlet before, we'll do it today. We're coming after all the sectors.
Right, Mr. Michel.
Oui. Merci. Je voudrais parler en français, puisque pour être plus précisément en regard de l'intervention de Lionel Guérin. Tout d'abord parce que ici je représente un constructeur aéronautique après avoir effectivement eu des fonctions à l'OACI. Je voudrais dire que je suis tout à fait d'accord avec Lionel sur le fait que la première priorité c'est de réduire les émissions à la source. Bien évidemment, ça fait 40 ans qu'on le fait et ça aboutit à une réduction de 70% des émissions. Donc la technologie a bien joué, les opérations ont joué leur rôle également, ont été optimisées. Et ça a été rappelé par Michael Gill au début, l'objectif c'est 1,5% d'efficacité énergétique par an. Alors je crois pouvoir dire que les constructeurs font un bon usage des subventions qu'ils ne reçoivent pas. Car ils ne reçoivent pas de subventions, je voudrais rappeler quand même que la 320, tout ce qui a été donné pour la 320, qui est un programme exceptionnel, non seulement je dirais, ne représente pas des subventions, mais plutôt une recette pour l'État. Donc ça, je voudrais le dire, l'industrie en Europe dépense 10% de son chiffre d'affaires en recherche, ce qui représente 20 milliards par an, qui est beaucoup plus que les subventions publiques à la recherche, y compris au niveau européen. Et tout cet effort de recherche a un impact environnemental environ à 80%. Donc on peut dire que notre objectif premier, c'est bien d'éviter qu'on ait besoin des MBM. Mais on sait très bien que la technologie ne suffira pas pour satisfaire nos ambitions. Donc ce que fait l'OACI pour nous, pour les constructeurs aéronautiques, est très important. Nous ne sommes pas sur la ligne de front, ce sont les compagnies aériennes qui sont sur la ligne de front. C'est elles qui sont confrontées à la concurrence internationale. Et donc, nous jouons le rôle, non seulement, je dirais, de faire progresser la technologie, mais aussi de faciliter les discussions et de faciliter l'aboutissement des travaux. C'est ça le rôle de l'industrie aujourd'hui, que ce soit l'industrie européenne, Airbus en tête, ou l'industrie américaine avec Boeing. Et ce que fait le CAEP représente un travail considérable. Jen n'en a pas parlé beaucoup, mais ça représente un travail considérable. Alors, maintenant, pour être pratique, parce que le titre, c'était, il nous posait la question de savoir si le secteur de l'aviation pourrait, en quelque sorte, utiliser RED+, pour ses compensations. C'est ça la question. Alors, elle est peut-être posée un peu tôt. Je pense que les questions concernant l'aviation sont tellement complexes. On n'est pas dans un système national, on est dans un système mondial qui, en plus, obéit à des règles en matière de concurrence. Il faut un système non discriminatoire. En plus, il faut que ce système se situe dans le cadre des discussions sur la Convention cadre des Nations Unies, avec ce qui va en sortir. Je ne sais pas ce qui en sortira, mais on sait bien qu'il y a quand même un débat sur l'effort respectif à faire en fonction des États, en fonction de l'état de développement des différents pays. Donc ceci, inévitablement, aussi intervient dans les discussions à l'OACI. Et là, c'est mon ancienne casquette, mais et c'est un des points principaux. Comment fait-on pour partager la charge de compensation et pour satisfaire cet objectif, tout en respectant ces principes généraux qui sont quelquefois pas tout à fait en ligne, hein, non-discrimination et je dirais l'ancien CBDR qui aujourd'hui prend une autre forme. Mais une fois qu'on aura réglé ces questions-là, qu'on aura décidé que les États... Alors je voudrais rappeler quelque chose. Les États de l'OACI, c'est les mêmes que les États de la COP. 191, 190, bon, à quelque chose près, ce sont les mêmes États. Donc là aussi, je dirais que si les États ont envie de lancer de nouvelles idées ou de nouvelles commandes, qu'ils le fassent. Ils peuvent le faire à l'OACI et aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas encore sur la table. Donc je dirais, moi je n'écarte pas, il ne faut pas écarter aucune solution. Celle-ci est très intéressante à mon sens parce qu'elle constitue un système global. Et quand je pense à système global, je pense à aviation. C'est vrai, c'est cette caractéristique-là qui est intéressante. Et donc, bon, est-ce que l'Assemblée, lorsque l'Assemblée, qui a été évoquée par Jen Hupe en 2016, en septembre 2016, aboutira à des décisions, des solutions, il faudra à ce moment-là voir si les États, je dis bien les États, décident d'aller plus loin sur ce terrain de la compensation, s'ils décident d'un système de compensation. Mais aujourd'hui, je trouve que ça peut constituer quelque chose d'intéressant pour l'avenir, mais il faut l'étudier. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup, Michel Wackenheim. De toute manière, nous nous y prenons un peu tôt parce que vous savez, Kevin, c'est en 2005 qu'il a introduit la forêt. Moi-même, j'étais à Rio en 92. Ça prend du temps, tout ça, donc il vaut mieux partir à temps, comme dans la fable de La Fontaine. Mais en tous les cas, oui. Et l'OACI a fait un travail formidable. Et par exemple, en matière de sécurité aérienne, il n'y a pas common but differentiated responsibility. Il y a common responsibilities. Parce qu'il n'y a pas des règles de sécurité moins fortes dans un pays en développement, parce qu'il est en développement. Et donc voilà, il y a toute une question intéressante. À la fin, passer de l'UNFCCC à l'OACI, c'est peut-être avoir une discussion un peu plus facile, plus simple, plus directe, plus franche. Je ne sais pas, peut-être on verra bien. Peut-être grâce à vous, grâce à Jane et à tout le monde. Une question là-bas.
Bonsoir, Dominique Overlo, France Stratégie. D'abord, bravo pour votre débat, bravo pour votre idée et véritablement, je vous souhaite de la mener jusqu'au bout. Un mot néanmoins de retour d'expérience sur les marchés ETS, sur les marchés de permis d'émission. Ces marchés de permis d'émission sont très difficiles à faire fonctionner. Il faut trouver un équilibre entre l'offre et la demande et il faut pouvoir réagir vite. Donc, je crois que si vous voulez, et j'en suis persuadé, si vous voulez mettre au point, mettre en fonctionnement votre marché, il y a 2 conseils ou 2 points à méditer. Le premier serait d'avoir un prix plancher et un prix plafond. Le prix plancher pour éviter que le prix ne tombe à zéro, le prix plafond pour éviter que ça ne parte à l'infini, ce qui fait que les acteurs abandonneraient le système. Et le deuxième point à méditer, c'est d'avoir une autorité de régulation du marché qui puisse intervenir rapidement pour remédier aux défauts, et il y en a toujours sur un marché. Merci beaucoup et bonne continuation véritablement.
Merci à vous. Well, thank you. If there is no question, I think we're going to come slowly to an end. You wanted, perhaps it would be nice to have some final words. I mean, you know, this is just work in progress. Huh? We are starting and we have a lot of work to do. We know that. Jean-Marc wants to say something. But, okay. Jean-Marc, do you have a microphone? Somebody else here, sorry. There's lots of questions.
Clotilde Tronquet, I4C, Institute for Climate Economics. I was wondering if the airline companies are wishing to offset their emissions as well in developed countries. In the forest area, it would be so improved management practices or afforestation projects. So, is there any interest in this sense?
Nathalie, tu peux peut-être dire deux mots là sur le programme de Madagascar dans ce cadre-là.
Your question is about having some projects in developed countries and not in... Okay. So I think that what has been said by Jane Hupe is that in ICAO and in IATA, as said by Michael Gill also, I think that airlines would like to have the overall capacity of different projects, and why not also in developed countries. And especially we didn't discuss about reducing at the source our CO2 emissions by using biofuels. Yeah. And this could be definitely something that could be also used to develop those kind of developments in biofuels.
Okay, thank you. As an environmentalist, I'm always afraid of biofuels, but I can tell you that there's very interesting developments with alternative fuels which come from recycling CO2, transforming CO2 into fuel. It could be interesting for aviation. We don't know when it's going to come out. Perhaps, so listen, Jean-Marc, you wanted to put something, yes?
J'ai une question, et comme elle est adressée à quelqu'un qui parle français, je vais la poser en français. J'ai noté avec beaucoup d'intérêt tout à l'heure la suggestion de Lionel Guérin de mettre une vignette chez les constructeurs aériens. Et par ailleurs, je crois avoir compris qu'il plaidait indirectement, je vais quand même mettre un peu le pastis entre les panélistes, qu'il plaidait indirectement pour un mécanisme beaucoup plus simple et direct que ce qui a été évoqué tout à l'heure en ce qui concerne, on va dire très bêtement, une taxe carbone affectée. Hein. Si on poursuit alors, petite question 1, est-ce que cette idée de vignette sur les avions est l'idée du jour d'un seul homme, ou est-ce qu'il y a plus d'une personne dans le secteur qui se dit que ça ne serait pas idiot? Et deux, non. Et deux, la question sur le fait d'avoir directement une taxe carbone affectée, qu'est-ce que ça pose comme problème au niveau de la confiance dans là où va l'argent, et qu'est-ce que ça offre comme facilité versus un système plus compliqué qui est celui qui a été défendu tout à l'heure par l'OACI?
Je citais tout à l'heure la vignette parce que je prenais l'exemple de la voiture de façon tout à fait triviale. Et si la voiture a baissé ses consommations, c'est en partie par rapport à cela, avec tous les débats autour des constructeurs d'ailleurs actuels. Donc c'est un point. Et je disais qu'au début, et je suis d'accord avec Michel, les constructeurs ont fait des efforts importants parce que depuis 20 ans, je crois qu'on a divisé par 5 la consommation en passagers, on a 3,5 litres au 100. Mais Michel, j'ai vécu aussi comme toi d'autres organismes avec d'autres organismes où j'avais le sentiment que ça n'allait pas assez vite. Voilà, bon, ça n'allait pas assez vite et que ça n'a jamais assez vite, mais là il y a une certaine urgence sur la planète, donc je pense qu'il faut un peu accélérer le débat et arrêter de se poser des questions. Ça, c'est moi qui le dis personnellement. Donc je pense qu'il faut faire quelque chose autour de la construction, de l'innovation, de la technologie et d'accélérer le processus. On n'a pas parlé aussi des biocarburants, nouvelle génération. Ça aussi, c'est On sait que ça ne révolutionne pas complètement. Enfin, les nouveaux biocarburants, il faudrait aussi peut-être se poser la question et continuer à investir en recherche sur ces domaines-là, parce qu'il y a des recherches un peu partout dans le monde. C'est une autre façon aussi d'émettre moins de CO2. Et puis, troisièmement, sur le direct. Sur le direct, c'est vraiment à l'OSCI, effectivement, ou une organisation mondiale. Hein. Je suis d'accord avec ce que disait Michel, ce que dit Brice. C'est vraiment une organisation mondiale qui doit mettre des directives mondiales à toutes les airlines mondiales, puisque c'est globalisé, le transport aérien, c'est pas sur un continent, ça veut rien dire, c'est pas européen, américain, mais on a besoin de crédibilité, d'aller directement à la source, d'être sûr que c'est crédible. Quand on fait une opération comme Madagascar, de s'apercevoir que sur la durée, le bilan carbone va être bon, sur 5 ans, sur 10 ans, sur 15 ans, il faut une stabilité, il faut savoir de quoi on parle, quel est le référentiel de départ. Tout ça, on en a besoin. On a besoin, nous, les airlines et nos personnels et nos clients, de s'investir sur le sujet pour aller plus loin. C'est-à-dire de connaître directement. De ne pas simplement s'acheter un crédit carbone et puis on continue. Non, c'est de réduire, de compenser et d'aller directement, de s'intéresser. Et moi, cette opération, telle que je l'ai comprise, mais je n'étais pas là dans le débat tout à l'heure, c'est une opération intéressante parce qu'elle regroupe des initiatives dont on sait, si on avait une influence directe sur stopper dans certains pays les déforestation, aider les autres à maintenir l'état de la forêt comme elle est, et puis suivant des critères très, pas que mais biologiques aussi, ou biodiversité, les intégrer dans ces programmes-là. Je crois que c'est bien et ça parle de plus en plus à nos générations qui arrivent dans nos airlines avec nos clients. C'est important de participer parce que c'est une prise de conscience à la fois industrielle mais personnelle pour que ça fonctionne. Sinon, ça ne fonctionne pas. On dira, bon, qu'on pense une taxation de plus ou de moins, ça ne changera pas le comportement des uns et des autres. Voilà ce que je voulais dire, Jean-Marc.
Merci Lionel. Oui, monsieur.
Oui, bonjour. Romuald Vaudry, je représente l'association etc. qui met en œuvre le projet RED+ à Madagascar qui est financé par Air France depuis 2008. Ce n'est pas vraiment une question mais plutôt une modeste recommandation ou attirer l'attention spécialement de Kevin sur le sujet. C'est que même si effectivement nous sommes tous partants pour évoluer, pour sortir de cette approche projet et d'aller vers cette approche nationale, sous-nationale, moi j'ai quelques craintes que d'ici 2020, l'Afrique particulièrement, tous les pays africains ne soient pas complètement prêts à sauter dans cette approche et à migrer de cette approche projet à l'approche nationale. Et ce que j'aimerais éviter, c'est qu'on laisse de nouveau l'Afrique un peu en dehors du chemin, notamment parce que jusqu'à présent, les mécanismes de l'UNFCCC l'ont laissé un peu en dehors du chemin. Donc c'est juste un modeste retour d'expérience de praticiens de terrain. On est sur les fronts de déforestation, nous à l'autre bout de la chaîne, et également en renforcement de capacité d'institutions qui vont avoir besoin de temps avant qu'on puisse vraiment sauter dans cette approche nationale ou sous-nationale.
Well,
it's okay.
Is it working? Okay. Again, I think you're confusing two issues. So what we're talking about is national accounting and national monitoring. What you're talking about is implementation. Okay. So countries. Well, I'd ask that you do not diminish Africa, for the following reason. There are many, many countries in Africa that will have national monitoring systems by 2020. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm working with them and I know they will. Okay? And there are many organizations such as the World Bank and the UN that are helping them to get there, and there's significant funding to help them achieve that. Because everyone understands that we're wasting each other's breath if we're talking about the climate and forests if we're not doing this on a global scale. So there's a lot of money, a lot of energy being put into that. So I hope to surprise you by 2020. In fact, I'm working to do that. So let's have another one of these sessions in 2020 and we'll see what happens.
Great. Thank you very much. And by the way, you have some satellites we're exposed here who help Africa to track what's happening in the forest. So there's lots of things happening. Listen, we are coming to an end, so I don't know if you want to say final words, all of you, and if you have your tracking. Okay.
I'm saving my final words from my colleague.
Okay, great. Jane, you want to have a final word? Say goodbye and see you in 2016?
Yes, that's exactly what I would like to say. So there is a lot of uncertainty still. Today, we are in the middle of a process. It's work in progress, and I will souligner progress here. And, well, I will not wait until 2020. Let's get together next year in the next COP, because it will be after our assembly. And I hope to bring very good news to you all on our decision by the next assembly. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you. Thank you, Brice.
Okay, great.
All right. Baba?
Please.
So I'd like to say thank you to Kevin for taking a flying leap and inviting me to come and do this at the COP, which is summarize proceedings in rap form to end them. So here's what I've been listening to and what I just composed. Fossil fuel has been hurting us, but air travel is about to get a lot more virtuous. We've got a match made in heaven if it's only given a chance, like teenagers flirting at a high school dance. The aviation industry has been accused of villainy, with incendiary emissions entering the atmosphere incessantly. You can only reduce emissions so far with fuel efficiency. So the ICAO is the bad boy at the prom, like, you know you're gonna keep on flying, so bring it on. And the host of the dance, the chaperone, is Brice Lalonde, the man you can't say no to, even if you want, because he cuts with precision. Even his name, Brice, that's a form of circumcision. Mess with him and you'll end up in an uncomfortable position. But don't worry, because this is a story of redemption. The belle of the ball is the Rainforest Nation Coalition. Beautiful, fragile, wild, and filled with natural riches, just not literal riches yet. But a plan to reduce emissions through a system of verified ecosystem protections. The belle of the ball is like, we can dance, honey, but she's out to marry a rich guy, so she's like, show me the money. Baby, I can get you to peak emissions by 2020 and zero by 2050. I'll make it transparent. It won't pull anything funny. Just get the offset funding, baby, and we can do this. You know she's got the most well-formed emissions units, standardized, harmonized, perfect curves and perfect lines. You can see it in her eyes. She's determined to get UNFCCC certified. And the airlines, ooh, they really want it. But if they like it, then they'd better put a ring on it. And CFRN represents a hot collection of friends. Colombia, Panama, PNG. You wouldn't believe it. These girls are already popular with Norwegians. And the right deal at the end of the COP is going to start this marriage. It'll be too productive to stop. It's your typical modern romance. They both want to dance, but they both demand sustainable, predictable finance. So let's get the red market mechanisms enshrined in the final agreement and begin a marriage of minds. I simply can't wait for the day that I feel fine when I'm making my travel plans. Let's hear it for guilt-free flying. Okay, I'll finish there. I got a flight to catch on Red Air.
And this brings us to an end. Thank you very much. Thank you all.